Hey everyone, tonight we travel to a world where blood fed the sun, where a single leaf shaped an empire, and where a princess raced her way into legend without ever holding the reins. We read diving deep into three extraordinary stories from the ancient world, each more gripping than the last. Stories of sacrifice, of sipping tea like poetry, and of a woman who shattered the rules of the most sacred games in history. But before we begin, let's settle in. Dim the lights. Maybe pour yourself a cup of something warm. Let the noise of the day fade into the background. Because tonight, we're not just learning history. We're stepping inside it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, breathe, close your eyes if you want to, and let's begin. The fate of an Aztec sacrifice victim. Close your eyes. Feel the stone beneath your feet. Cool at first, but warming now in the rising sun. You're standing in the heart of Tenochtitlan, the great island capital of the Aztec Empire. Around you, the city stirs. Canoes glide across shimmering canals. Markets buzz with voices, the scent of tamales and roasted maize filling the air. Priests chant in the distance. Banners flutter above temple rooftops. And you? You are dressed in fine cotton, dyed crimson and gold. A headdress of quetzal feathers rests on your head. Your body is painted in sacred symbols, red for the sun, black for the underworld, white for the breath that's about to leave your lungs. You are not a prisoner. You are not a criminal. You are something far more dangerous. You are honored, because today you will be sacrificed, not as punishment, but as a gift to the gods. And in the Aztec world, there is no higher honor. Take a breath, because this is your last day alive. You didn't volunteer. No one did. There was no application, no interview, no farewell party. Just the quiet, terrifying understanding that the gods had chosen you. Maybe you were a warrior, captured in battle. The Aztecs didn't kill their bravest enemies, they kept them, because a strong, fearless fighter made the most powerful offering. Or perhaps you were a slave, suddenly given better food, finer clothes, paraded through the streets like royalty. A final kindness before the end. Or maybe you were just in the right place at the wrong time. Healthy, strong, young. The perfect body to carry the weight of the cosmos on its back. To the Aztecs, the world balanced on a knife's edge. The sun needed blood to rise. The rains needed sacrifice to fall. Without offerings, the universe would collapse into darkness. And you? You were the fuel. The priests told you this every day. Not to scare you, but to comfort you. You are special, they said. The gods have smiled upon you. Your death will feed the sun. Your heart will power the heavens. They fed you well, rich tamales, fresh fruit, even cacao, the drink of kings. You wore garments only nobles could afford. People bowed as you passed. Children pointed. Elders whispered prayers. You were treated like a god, because for a few days, you were one. You walked through the city, not in chains, but in ceremony. You sang, danced, played music, part of the festival, part of the myth. You were no longer just a man or a woman. You were a living symbol, a bridge between earth and sky. But deep down, you knew the truth. This wasn't a coronation. It was a countdown, and the clock was ticking. The morning of the sacrifice began not with peace, but with sound. The deep, thunderous beat of the tapanastli, the sacred drum, echoed across the city. Not a gentle wake-up call, a reminder. The gods were waiting. Priests arrived. They anointed you with water, burned incense, chanted blessings. You were painted again, more vividly, more completely. Your face, your arms, your chest, transformed into a canvas of divine meaning. You were no longer human. You were art, a walking offering. Then came the procession. Trumpets, flutes, dancers in feathered costumes. The crowd lined the streets, throwing flowers, whispering prayers. And there you were in the center, not marching to freedom, but to the base of the Templo Mayor, the great temple, a pyramid of stone rising over 100 feet into the sky, and at the top, an altar, and a priest holding an obsidian knife, black, sharp, cold. You began the climb, barefoot, each step carved into stone, steep, relentless. Halfway up you looked back. The city sprawled below, lakes, canals, temples, homes. A world still alive, a world you were about to leave. You reached the top. The air was thinner, the drums louder. The crowd's chant rose like a wave, and there it was, the sacrificial stone. You were laid down. 4 attendants held your arms and legs, not roughly but firmly, like they were placing a sacred object into position. The high priest raised the blade to the sun, and in one swift, practiced motion, he cut, just below the ribs. The obsidian sliced through flesh, and with his hand he reached in and pulled out your still beating heart, held it high to the sky. The crowd erupted, not in horror, in praise, because to them you had done it. You had given yourself, and the sun, it would rise again. Your body was rolled down the temple steps, a final act of spectacle, a reminder to all, this is the price of life. But your story didn't end there. In death you were honored. Your bones might be kept as relics, your name remembered in song. Your spirit, they believed, would journey to the afterlife, perhaps joining the sun god on his daily flight across the sky. Or if offered to Tlaloc, the rain god, you'd rest in a paradise of eternal spring. You weren't mourned, you were celebrated. Because in the Aztec world, to die in sacrifice wasn't tragedy. It was transcendence. But here's the truth they didn't tell you. The honor, it wasn't for you. It was for them, for the empire, for the people, for the idea that the world must be fed with blood, with fear, with beauty. And you were the meal. So when they say you were chosen by the gods, ask yourself, who really made the choice, and who truly benefited from your death? And would you have said yes, if you'd been given the chance? The history of tea in China, from medicine to global legacy now. Let the scene change. The air grows cooler. The scent of incense shifts from blood and smoke to something softer, earthy, green. You're no longer on a temple stair. You're in a mist-covered mountain valley, somewhere in southern China. The year 200 BCE, and in your hand a single leaf. Not just any leaf. It's Camellia sinensis, the first tea, and this is where a 2,000-year journey begins. But back then, no one was sipping it for pleasure. No porcelain cups, no quiet ceremonies. This was medicine, a bitter brew, boiled with scallions, ginger, and citrus peel. more like a warrior's tonic than a poet's companion. In the Han Dynasty, tea wasn't drunk. It was prescribed. Physicians recommended it to clear the mind, ease digestion, and cool the body's excess heat, a concept from early Chinese medicine. You didn't drink tea to relax. You drank it to survive. And the preparation, nothing elegant. Tea leaves were steamed, pressed into hard bricks like blocks of compressed energy, and stored for trade or travel. When it was time to use, someone would shave off a piece, toss it into boiling water, and stir. The result? A pungent, savory broth, more like a peasant soup than the delicate infusion we know today. But even then, even in those rough, medicinal pots, something was stirring. People began to notice not just the effects, the alertness, the clarity, but the ritual of it. The way the steam curled upward, the way the color changed as the leaves unfurled, the way the body relaxed just slightly after the first sip. Tea was no longer just a remedy. It was becoming a relationship. And by the time the Tang Dynasty rose in the 7th century, that relationship turned into a love affair. Imagine Chang'an, the capital, a city of poets, scholars, and silk-robed diplomats. And in its tea houses, not just drinkers, connoisseurs, tea was no longer boiled, it was whisked. Leaves were ground into a fine powder, mixed with hot water, and stirred into a frothy jade-green elixir, sometimes with a pinch of salt, a touch of spice. And the man who gave this ritual its soul, Lu Yu, a monk, a scholar, an outcast, and now the sage of tea. Around 760 CE, he wrote the classic of tea, the world's first full treatise on the art of tea. Not just how to brew it, but how to grow it, how to pick it, how to honor it. He wrote of water, the best from mountain springs, never boiled twice. Of fire, best from charcoal, never from pine. Of silence, the ideal moment to drink tea was when the mind was still and the heart open. This wasn't just a book, it was a philosophy. And under Lu Yu's influence, tea became more than a drink. It became a symbol of refinement, balance, and harmony. The Tang elite didn't just serve tea, they performed it. Tea houses flourished, not just as cafes, but as cultural hubs. Poets recited verses over steaming bowls. Diplomats sealed treaties with a shared cup. Monks used it to stay awake during meditation, and the Japanese monks who visited China, they took the practice home, and centuries later it would become the Japanese tea ceremony. But the Tang Dynasty wasn't the end. It was just the beginning, because by the time the Song Dynasty arrived, tea had become art. Imagine a court banquet, delicate porcelain bowls, bamboo whisks, a master grinding tea into a powder so fine it looked like jade dust. This was the golden age of Dian Sha, the tea contest. Participants competed not on strength or speed, but on foam, the goal, to create the most beautiful, lasting froth, thick, smooth, and white as snow. The finest foam could hold its shape long enough for a poet to write a line on its surface. Lose the foam? That was like showing up to a royal ball with muddy boots. The Song emperors themselves were obsessed. Emperor Hizong, a painter, calligrapher, and tea fanatic, even wrote his own treatise, the Treatise on Tea. He praised the pale green color, the lingering sweetness, the way the cup felt in the hand. Tea wasn't just culture, it was imperial identity. But then the world changed. The Mongols came, and with them a new way of life. The Han Dynasty didn't care for frothy green tea. They were horsemen of the steppe, and they drank their tea strong, with milk, with salt, with butter, boiled in kettles over open fires. This was tea as fuel, as survival. No contests, no poetry, just warmth in the cold. And yet, even here, tea adapted. Bricks of compressed tea traveled the Silk Road, becoming currency in distant lands. Spices from Persia and India found their way into the brew, and tea began its slow journey beyond China's borders. Then, in 1368, the Ming Dynasty rose, and with it, a revolution. Emperor Hung Wu, the founder, issued a decree: no more tea bricks, no more powdered tea, from now on loose leaf only. It was a radical shift. Farmers began cultivating delicate new varieties: Dragon Well from Hangzhou, Bilio Chun from Jiangsu, and the teapot? It was born, no longer just a vessel. It became an art form. In Qing, artisans crafted unglazed clay teapots, each one absorbing the essence of the tea over time, growing richer with every brew. Porcelain makers in Qing created cups so thin you could see the color of the liquor like stained glass. And the act of brewing, it became a meditation. Water heated just below boiling, leaves gently placed, time allowed to unfold. This was tea stripped back to its essence. Not performance, not spectacle, just presence. And by the time the Qing dynasty took power in 1644, tea wasn't just a drink. It was a global empire. The British were obsessed. They wanted black tea hung cha because it lasted longer on long sea voyages. Lapsang Souchong, smoky and bold, became a favorite in London drawing rooms. And the trade? It was immense. Chests of tea left Canton by the thousands. But silver flowed out of Britain, so they found a way to balance the scales. Opium. They flooded China with it. Addiction spread. The Opium Wars began, and tea, once a symbol of peace, became entangled in empire, war, and tragedy. And yet, even in the chaos, tea endured. Because in China, tea was never just about trade. It was about philosophy, about connection. In Taoism, tea was harmony with nature, the mist, the soil, the quiet of the mountains. In Confucianism, it was civility, the host serving the guest, the student honoring the teacher. In Buddhism, it was mindfulness, the steam, the silence, the moment before the first sip. And in the tea houses of Beijing, Chengdu, and Guangzhou, they were the heartbeat of the city. Merchants made deals. Storytellers held crowds spellbound. Old men played chess. Young lovers shared a pot. It was democracy in a cup. And today, tea is still everywhere. In the yum cha dim sum halls of the South. In the iced jasmine bottles of convenience stores. In the quiet ritual of a single person brewing gong fu cha. Small cups, many steepings, each one a meditation. Because tea in China is more than a drink. It's a thread that runs through medicine, art, war, trade, and spirituality. It's a leaf that has outlived emperors, a ritual that has survived revolutions. And every time someone heats water, releases the leaves, and takes that first thoughtful sip, they're not just drinking tea. They're stepping into a story that began 2,000 years ago. A story of a single leaf that changed the world. Athletics in ancient Greece. The story of Cynisca of Sparta now. Let's travel once more, this time to ancient Greece, to a world where sport was sacred, where every foot race was a prayer, every wrestling match a test of divine favor, and where, in the dust of the Olympic Stadium, a woman named Cynisca did the impossible, not by breaking the rules, but by playing the game and winning. In ancient Greece, athletics weren't entertainment. They were worship. The Olympic Games weren't just competitions. They were festivals for Zeus. Every 4 years, city-states laid down their weapons. As sacred truce, the Hecateria was declared. No wars, no raids, only peace, so the games could begin. Athletes arrived from across the Greek world. They trained for years. They swore oaths before the gods. And when they stepped into the stadium, they weren't just racing for glory. They were racing for immortality. Victory meant more than a crown. It meant statues, poems, feasts in your honor, your name echoing through time. But there was one rule, absolute and unspoken. Only men. Women weren't just barred from competing. They weren't even allowed to watch. To be caught in the stadium during the games, the punishment was death, thrown from a cliff. And yet, one woman found a way, not by disguising herself, not by sneaking in, but by playing by the rules and still rewriting history. Her name, Cynisca of Sparta. Born around 440 BCE, she wasn't just any woman. She was a princess, daughter of a king, sister to a king, and raised in a place unlike any other in Greece, Sparta. While women in Athens were confined to the home, silent and unseen, Spartan women ran, they wrestled, they trained their bodies. Because in Sparta, strong women raised strong warriors. They managed estates. They owned land. They spoke their minds, and they were seen. So when Cynisca looked at the Olympic Games, not as a spectator, but as a player, it wasn't madness. It was ambition. But how? She couldn't race. She couldn't wrestle. She couldn't even be there. But there was one event where the victor wasn't the one who did, but the one who owned. Chariot racing. The most dangerous, prestigious, and expensive event in the games. Teams of 4 horses thundering around the hippodrome. Sharp turns, crashing wheels. A single mistake meant death. And the winner, not the driver, but the owner of the horses. And there was no rule saying that owner couldn't be a woman. So Cynisca did what no one thought possible. She built a stable. She bred the finest horses in Greece. She trained them. She prepared them. And in 396 BCE, she entered the 4-horse chariot race at Olympia. She didn't hold the reins. She didn't even attend. But when her team crossed the finish line first, it was her name that was called Cynisca of Sparta, the first woman ever to win at the Olympic Games. And the crowd, they didn't know what to do. The priests, they didn't know whether to celebrate or burn the results. But the rules were clear. The owner wins, and the owner was a woman. 4 years later, she did it again, 392 BCE. Same event, same result. Victory twice, in a row. A woman had not only entered the most sacred male arena in the Greek world, she had dominated it, and she didn't stop there. She commissioned statues of herself at Olympia, bronze figures of her chariot, her horses, her name inscribed in stone, and on the base words that would echo through history. I am the only woman in all Greece who has won this crown. Not boastful, just true. She didn't break the system. She used it. She didn't ask for permission. She claimed her place. And in doing so, she became more than a victor. She became a symbol, proof that even in the most rigid worlds, a single person with vision, resources, and courage can shift the ground beneath everyone's feet. Because Cynisca wasn't just racing for a wreath. She was racing for recognition, for the idea that honor isn't reserved for men, that legacy isn't written only by warriors, that even in a world that says no, you can still say, "Watch me." And so she did, and so she won, and so she was remembered, not as a footnote, not as a curiosity, but as a champion. And for the first time in history, a woman stood atop the Olympic podium, even if only in spirit. The threads that bind us, so we've walked through 3 stories, 3 worlds, 3 lives, real, imagined, remembered. The Aztec sacrifice told not as a horror, but as a tragedy wrapped in honor. The quiet evolution of tea, a leaf that outlived empires. And Cynisca, a princess who raced her way into eternity. And you might ask, what connects them? Why tell these together? Because they're all about who gets to be seen. In the Aztec world, the sacrifice was celebrated, but only after being stripped of choice. In China, tea became a symbol of harmony, but only after centuries of war, trade, and transformation. And in Greece, a woman won the highest honor, but only because no one thought to write her out of the rules. These aren't just stories of the past. They're reflections of how power works. Who decides what's sacred? Who controls the narrative? Who is remembered and who is erased? The sacrifice was honored, but never asked. The tea master was revered, but the farmer rarely named. And Cynisca? She won, but only because she was royal, wealthy, and bold enough to try. So what does this mean for us? Maybe it means we should look closer at the stories we're told, at the heroes we celebrate, at the quiet figures who shaped history without ever holding the blade, the cup, or the reins. Because history isn't just made by the loudest voices. It's shaped by the ones who endured, who adapted, who found a way, like the sacrifice who climbed the temple steps, like the monk who wrote the first tea book, like the woman who said, "I may not drive the chariot, but I own it." So the next time you sip tea or watch a race, or hear a story from long ago, ask yourself, who's missing from this moment? Who was here but never got to speak? And who, like Cynisca, is still waiting to be remembered? Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about who gets to tell it. And tonight, we remembered a few more names, and that matters. Thank you for being here, wherever you're watching from, whatever time it is in your world. This is human history. And I'll see you next time.